Hi, everybody, and welcome to Making Stuff with Mr. Hoon. We're on our third installment of review of linear perspective, more specifically, 1 point and 2 point perspective. Some terms I'm going to remind you of: orthogonal lines that make up the geometric shape, describe it, parallel lines next to each other. If they went on forever, they would never touch. Horizontal lines, vertical lines, the all-important horizon line, which is essentially the viewer's eye level. So the audience of this picture, the person that's looking at this picture, we're centering that horizon line somewhere in the center as though they can see part of the ground and the atmosphere above. Also, light source. Directly below the light source on the horizon is a dot, is a point, and that is a directional reference point for shadow. It's our shadow directional reference point. Over here, vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2. In the center, we have this central vanishing point for all of our 1-point perspective boxes. Last time, we explored the intricacies and complexities of casting a shadow realistically, representationally, using geometry, math, if you will, spatial relationships between how high the light source is in the supposed sky or how low the light source is, as a direct correlation to how long the shadow will be. We explored the shape of the shadow and the length of the shadow. Today, we're going to add a couple more forms: the cone and the sphere. I think that I'll skip the cylinder for now. We'll just call this exercise good. Once we fill in this page with 2 more cast shadows, possibly cast shadows from the floating forms, and then we're going to obliterate all of these orthogonal lines by either erasing them or covering them up with shadow. Now, music is brought to you by the band The Apples. This LP I purchased, it's on vinyl. You can hear it in the background, in 2010. This is from their double LP, The Apples in Stereo. So, now right here, you'll see the number or the letter H representing hard graphite. Hard graphite is light. It leaves less of itself behind. It's a hard, sharp line. Oh, and that reminds me, keep your pencils sharp, even if they're soft or hard. Always keep a sharp pencil. And then here for my shading, I'm going to go with a 5B. Now, at home, you might just have a regular 2H pencil. And you know as well as I do, because I've taught you all these months, that pressure matters. I mean, let's just demonstrate that. Even with a light pencil like this H, if I use hard pressure, I'm going to get a hard line. If I use light pressure, I'm going to get a light line. And I've always told you, when you're drawing with Mr. Hoon, to use light pressure first, and then when you're confident with your lines, then use hard pressure to reinstate your lines. That is a rule that lasts throughout any drawing exercise with Mr. Hoon that involves the illusion of depth. Certainly is the case with linear perspective. Right over here, I think I'm going to place a sketched in a small cone shape, and I do that with an upside down V. Now, as we can see in our previous exercises like this, the curved circle that's under a cone, it's a circle. The curved circle that's under the cone is going to become an ellipse the closer it gets to the eye level or the horizon line. And you can see by this demonstration here that we've done before, sometime back in, I think, October, you and me, you see that the ellipse gets thinner and thinner the closer to the horizon it gets. And you can imagine that in a cylinder. You can imagine that on any object that has actual circles in it. So an ellipse is a circle in perspective. It can be described mathematically with a quadratic equation. But we're just going to visually sketch, and we're going to estimate here. Since the bottom of the cone is a circle and that circle is far away from the horizon line, the curve on it is going to be pretty substantial. Not half of a circle by any means, but pretty well rounded. No pun intended. Now let's just go straight to the idea of the direction of the shadow. And I'm going to need my ruler for this. And you will too. The direction of the shadow here comes not from the light source, but from the directional point. And that directional point for shadows is directly below the light source on the horizon line. It's not a vanishing point. It's directly below the light source. In this case, it happens to be about about an inch away from the second vanishing point. What I do here is I anchor the edge of my ruler directly at that direction, or right on that directional point, and I pass it through the center of the bottom of the cone. This is the direction of the shadow. Now here, we need the shape of the shadow and the length of the shadow. And we get both of those things from the actual light source that I'm pointing at right here. So in this case, my ruler is going to pass through the top of the cone, keep going down until it meets that directional line of the shadow. So that is actually how long our shadow is going to be. Now, to get the shape of the shadow, I'm going to start a line that it's not over here. It's not at the edge of the upside down V. No, it's at our closest part of the curve. So, at our closest part of the curve, I will sketch. And then at the farthest part of the curve on the left, I will sketch. And now I have the shape, distance, length of the shadow. And I can fill that in. And these orthogonals, they'll be dealt with later. So hopefully you've been following along with that. Now when I lay out a cone like this, and I know where the cast shadow is, so obviously on the opposite side it's getting the most light. So I can just kind of scribble in some hatching that's rounded, that tends to get smaller and smaller on that left side, getting toward the center of the cone. And that's really going to be where my core shadow is, along this edge. And yes, we'll reinstate lines, and we'll use different softness, which means darkness of graphite, to add shadows. So we've got our little cone there. I think it's time for us to lay out a little bit of a sphere. What do you say? Now, I get to choose. I'm leading this instruction. I'm going to choose either sphere way back here, like a honker, like a big massive sphere like the Death Star, way off on the horizon. Or I'm going to do a little one like I did this little one down here. I'm not going to do that. I'm leaning toward the really massive sphere, this giant globe structure back here. Maybe it's a giant futuristic structure that people live in, like a Dyson sphere, and there's a sun inside of it. I don't know. But I am going to use that light helicopter method that I've taught y'all, just with a light sketch, notice that it's below the horizon, which implies that it's sitting on the plane. Now I'll leave the mess behind. Somewhere in this helicopter circle is an accurate circle. Now, everything I've done with the light source and the directional point for shadows applies to this too. So I'm going to let you catch up, and I'm going to flip the album to the other side, to the B side, man. To the B side. Yeah, Mr. Hoon loves vinyl. First of all, it sounds a little different. Analog does sound different. It's got a throatier sound to it. It's got different bass. It's not as tinny as digital. Of course, you have to have a good sound system in order to really appreciate vinyl. And another thing, it's got big pictures on the cover, man. Great art. That's been lost in the age of MP3s, you know? There we go. All right, I'm back at you. All right. For this, I know I've got an equator here and then at curved hatching lines that show that this is a sphere. And the shadow of the sphere will be somewhere on the left side and toward the center because our light source is this elevation in the sky. Now, I'm going to use the same principles for finding the direction of the shadow. It's close to the horizon. Starting at the base of it, I'm going to go off here. It's going to be somewhere out like that. Now, for this, what I tend to do, part of the shadow is going to be blocked by this big rectangular solid, this prism here. But I can lightly sketch. What I tend to do here is I find the halfway point of the distance of this circle. And here's what I mean by that. Look at my fingers. Let me bring it down. Look at that. The shadow is going to be exactly as long as from here to here because that's the width of the circle. Now in this case, I'm going to create an oval, a rather thin oval here, we're estimating. Now I sketched in here, but don't worry, I'll erase that later, and then I'll fill that oval in on the outside of the rectangular solid, coming up to the base of the sphere, respecting that curve of the cast shadow. You see this big rectangular solid, I'm reinstating its line here. This big rectangular solid is overlapping that shadow that's way off in the distance. I think it's time for me to use a B pencil and really reinstate the line where it seems accurate. I'm not going to bring that B pencil up here. I'll leave H's for this. I think I'll tilt the axis this way and use the same thing I've taught you in the past. Start making that ball of yarn look. Here at the very base of the shadow, I'll use a lot of pressure right up next to that rectangular solid. Maybe lessen the pressure just slightly. Here we can really see now the power of a soft B-type pencil. It just leaves so much of itself behind. Now that I've got cross-hatching here, I think I'm going to use my scumbling technique, which is just overlapping. Toward the bottom, I think I'll have somewhat of a blending between the cast shadow and the core shadow where we really can't tell where they separate. Then as I come up here, there's a nice little trick, if you will, of not shading exactly to the contour, just right up to it. I'm going to leave this here like that. No, I've taught you about blending so many times it hurts, and I do expect it. You'll notice also that in Google Classroom there's one, the video about the Italian Renaissance, the European Renaissance coming out of the Dark Ages, and its relationship to linear perspective. I'd like you to watch that and respond to the question. I'm not grading on right or wrong. I'm not interested in that. I want to create a discussion, a dialogue over the airwaves, so to speak, over the digital waves. And I will be responding to your answers to the question in written form on Google Classroom. And you just get points for participating, trying your best, writing a few sentences down. There is science behind this. There is history behind this. And I do expect you to know that. This is not just some YouTube video where, hey, how do you draw a sphere and cast a shit? That's part of it. But as your teacher, I want you to know a little bit of history too. And notice I'm not just saying art history. The visual arts are integrally linked to everything that is human. Language, written language, therefore, comes out of the visual arts. And any minimizing of the visual arts by people who are intimidated by it is simply ignorance. So it is my job as a teacher to challenge ignorance and destroy it. Now, I would like you to follow suit and actually watch that video and in your own words. And even if you want to record a verbal response, I'm in favor of modifications. I think it's more important to me that you attempt to understand and convey your ideas than have perfect writing. Although I'll give you clearer and clearer standards-based objectives as we get used to online learning. So we've got this sphere here. Now, before we go into these other objects, you know from the past that you can do a lot by having a lot of pressure in the top of the atmosphere and then slowly lessening the pressure as you come down so that on the horizon it's very light. And what this does is it creates depth. It's called atmospheric perspective. Things in the distance are going to seem foggier, less defined. But also when we look in the sky, even if it's nighttime, and no matter where we're at, in the middle of the Four Corners region of the United States, in wintertime, the blackest skies, lots of stars out, high pressure day, the nearest town is hundreds of miles away, you're still going to see this phenomenon of dark the higher you look in the sky and light on the horizon, no matter what time of day it is. So if you just use this technique, you're going to show depth in your picture plane. And notice how I'm not getting too stressed out about orthogonal lines. If I need to, I'll go in and erase some of them and reblend, and that's fine. I just want to see how it looks before I do that, just by covering the page. Yeah, nice and dark on the horizon. We're doing the same thing we did at the top of the page, but now we're starting at the horizon, and we're coming down with it. Oh, but wait, I'm coming to the shadow. This shadow's got to be at least as dark as that. And remember from last time, there's this interesting effect here where this part of the shadow is coming from the vanishing point, and this part of the shadow is coming from the shadow direction line directly under the light source. So you're going to add a more complex and interesting shadow if you honor that. So let me take a moment to do some cross hatching and blending so it's nice and rich. Whoa. Now it looks like I'm getting a really slow connection here, and that does not make me happy. So I'm going to look at the refresh rate, the FPS, things like that, and I'm going to try and speed the relationship up. I know that you're getting my audio just fine, but it looks like my strokes are lagging. So I'm going to cut the tape. Of course, when you get this on YouTube, it'll be seamless or roughly seamless, but I'm going to stop right now and do that. Right back at you, peeps. I'll use less pressure here so that we can show that interesting dynamic in the shadow. Work slightly lighter here. It's getting more light on this side. As I've said before, it's very important to keep a sharp pencil. I'm going to go over here to my desk sharpener. And do just that. Now, you can pretty much guarantee that Mr. Hoon's going to take his time in blending all of his shadows. As a matter of fact, at the start of the next tutorial I have for you, I'm going to show you this whole piece completely finished. But I just want to go inside a form now, and I want to think about it this way. What side of the rectangular solid is catching the most light? I would say the top side is catching the most light. So I'll actually start with that one. I'm going to go incredibly light with my hatching. I'm going to hatch in one direction. And I don't mean the band. Just hatch in one direction and let it be. Now, for the next surface, I got to think about where I think the next lightest is. Is it going to be here or is it going to be here? And I would argue that here is probably darker. Got to cast shadows on the opposite side of the light source. So here, we use a little bit more pressure, but this time, and somebody's calling me, and just like you know in my class, you're more important to me than some telemarketer, call, and I am at home, so if there's an emergency with my family, they'll just come upstairs and get me in my studio. Yeah, no phones in the studio. Keep the cell phones in the caddy, so to speak. Remember how when we were in school, hey, Mr. Hoon, can I go to the bathroom? Yeah, put it in the caddy. We'll get back to those days, kids. I miss you, kids. We'll get back to it. If we follow science, directions of our health department, governor, Centers for Disease Control, and sure, for our minds, for our psychology, for our psyche, appeal to whatever God you believe in, or don't, as the case may be. Be with your family, give them a hug, because we're all going through this together. COVID-19 epidemic. The most serious epidemic since the 1918 Spanish flu. Now, you see, this is slightly different than that. And I can always make subtle adjustments. I can scumble, and as a matter of fact, I expect you to. I want to see you, and you'll see that in the rubric on Google Classroom. I want to see you blend well. You're all capable of it, kids. Now, as I said before, I am simply grading pass-fail right now. Did you try? Everything that I showed you, did you try? Did you try and complete this space? Look to the rubric for guidance. Leave no white behind. Even as I stop this, I mean, you don't want a YouTube video that's hours long. Even if, as I stop this, there's going to be white left on here, but I don't want you to leave any. I want you to put the time in to create a convincing illusion of depth on a flat surface using linear perspective, values. Let's talk about the elements of art that really apply here. Line, values, right? Texture, smooth surface here. Okay? Space, shape, form. That's the 3D version of shape, right? Think about these things as you're making. Now here, this guy, this side, more pressure. It's darker. Very dark. Very close to the cast shadow. I don't know, you might make it darker than the cast shadow. That's really up to you. I would argue, though, that there should be maybe a slight difference between the cast shadow and this space, so that we can see it as an audience. We can see that there's two surfaces, one and then the ground, the plane. Start off by hatching, in one direction. With a sharp pencil, you can cross hatch later. And scumble to finish off. You know that scumbling, those circular motions like this. Always start lightly, use very little pressure. You can add more pressure later. But that scumbling is really the ticket. That's the key to really blending your values. Look at that. Delicious. Hot city. think it's obvious that my record turned off. But this is a double LP, man. I've got one more album. Hold on a second, kids. I'll put a record on. Oh, yeah. The Apples. In stereo. 2010. The Apples. Got a really retro sound. Remind me of the 1960s pop scene. All right. You know, when you put on an album, you want to clean it because it picks up microparticles, dust. But this isn't about turntables and throwing vinyl. But I did want you to have some tunes while we work together. I'm going to bring this down here. Down into this guy here. Hi, I'm just a little cone. Just a little cone, that's me. Just a little cone man. Alright, little cone man. I'm going to fill in that shadow. That's right. You make a difference, little cone man. You make a difference in this world. You have a presence. We know you're here because you have a cast shadow. You are responding to light. You are not a figment of our imagination. You are a cone, and don't you forget it. I'm going to start in that center of the core shadow and work my way up with some scumbling, because I already put my rounded hatching down there. But I'm going to go back to the hatching. So, man, we got a lot going on, dude. I'm going to leave it at this. I'm going to ask you to look at the rubric, look at what I'm looking for and what a complete drawing is. Try your best. There's not going to be any A's, B's, or C's, or 90% or even proficient, not proficient. There's just going to be you tried, and it's obvious. You went through all 3 of my lessons on this, and you tried. And don't forget the video about the Renaissance and linear perspective coming out of the Renaissance, or being rediscovered during the Renaissance in Europe. It's very Eurocentric. But that's where it was rediscovered. So, yeah. Miss hanging out with you kids, but I hope that this is the next best thing to it, actually working over the digital waves, over the fiber optic cables, so to speak. I'll be back with you, and you can always reach out to me via email or on the Google Classroom. You can ask questions, and please do so. Reach out to me, and stay healthy, stay strong in mind, body, and spirit. Give somebody you love a hug in your house. Practice social distancing. I'm talking about in your house, okay? I'm not talking about going out and seeing somebody and giving them a hug. Respect social distancing. It's there for a reason. It's not a conspiracy, kids. We're gonna contain this over time. But anyway, use creativity to your benefit. Show love to your family that are with you in this time of shelter, and give a virtual hug to those others that you love at a distance. Respect social distancing, and I hope you enjoy your time with Mr. Hoon today. I'll get right back at you soon. I'm going to look at your responses Friday and over the weekend. And then we'll move into 3-point perspective. Sound good, peeps? Right on. Hunker down. Social distancing when you're out and about, which you shouldn't be very much. And shelter in place. Be with your loved ones. Thank you for your efforts. And take a look at that drawing. It's coming along nicely. Mr. Hoon signing off.